All right, I'm here for another episode of DxTx Partners Podcast, and I am super excited that I have Jeff Hoover. Jeff Hoover from Hoover Consulting. He's a leadership consultant coach. And little backstory, I met Jeff over 25 years ago, and Jeff was not only just an incredible leader, mentor, became a friend, and just periodically kept in touch over the last 25 years. So just tons of experience, huge influence on my career, especially early on as a new manager at Johnson and Johnson, and I was so blessed that Jeff kind of took me under his wing, and I became part of the one of the branches on his tree. With when I look through Jeff, and I look like on LinkedIn, and I see all the people that I know were part of that tree early on, and seeing what they're doing across the country, it's just amazing. So, welcome. I'm glad to have you. And why don't we start out, just tell us where are you at today, and then start telling us about Jeff Hoover's leadership journey.
Well, Mike, thank you. And if I ever finish the book that I'm writing, I'm going to have you write the foreword. So I'm coming to you today from the southwest Gulf Coast of Florida, a place called Lakewood Ranch, just east of Sarasota.
Awesome. Tell us a little bit about just your background and your journey and kind of what you've done throughout your career.
By training, by experience, sales, marketing, and operations guy. I was 11 years in marketing in the retail industry before I moved into the healthcare industry, where I really was blessed to spend a valuable 18 years at Johnson and Johnson, which is where you and I met. And then I had the great opportunity to just move on and expand my experiences. I went to a small startup that provided predictive and advanced analytics to the healthcare industry, business insights. And I had a commitment to the board to get them to a certain goal. I was able to do that in 18 months. And then I moved to Baxter Healthcare, where I had my first opportunity to do global commercial excellence and interact with teams all over the world, which was a fantastic job. We spun out the bioscience division to be its own standalone publicly traded company. It was acquired, and I was in the marketplace looking for my next role, and I landed a commercial excellence job at GE Healthcare, where I also spent about 6 years, same as Baxter. The great blessing that I have in the healthcare industry is that I've been able to see pharmaceuticals, specialty pharmaceuticals, biopharmaceuticals, and equipment and services. And I've had an opportunity to work for some great leaders. I've interacted with some great clinicians who were also great leaders. And on the flip side of that coin, I've also seen the not so great ones, and I've learned from both.
That's great. Without having to do a lot of the math, that's a lot of leadership for a long time.
A little
How
time.
have you seen kind of your leadership style evolve over those years? Has anything changed?
Oh, no, a lot has changed. Look, I'm of the philosophy, Mike, that if you ever believe that you've arrived at being the best leader that you can be, you've missed the message. I still learn every day. And many of the learnings that I have are people who I coach that are first time leaders because the world that they operate in is different. Our markets change, customer buying patterns change, people change. We happen to have a very diverse employee base across, all of the healthcare industry now. And if you're not willing to adapt and grow and learn, you're going to miss your optimal leadership moments. I really think when I first became a first time leader, I got some really good advice that whenever you decide or make the decision to become a leader of people, it is no longer about you. And you and I both came from an individual contributor role where it was all about us and our performance and what we did and how we carried ourselves, how we represented the company. But then when you step into a leadership role, you really do measure your success by the success of your team. They get all the accolades, you take all the heat.
Owen and I did one of these one of these talks a little while ago, and talking about some of the early lessons that you learned the hard way. And one of my examples had to do with, I came from the behavioral health background, hadn't been in sales, and learned a hard lesson of kind of crossing the line between sales and clinical with a doctor who set me straight, and that really helped me as a leader. Are there any leadership lessons that you've learned the hard way?
Definitely. Probably the greatest lesson that I would share with anybody is that never let the highs get too high and don't let the lows get too low. I have had periods of time in my career when I first became a people leader, a district manager at Johnson and Johnson. Out of the 4 years that I did that job, we went to the highest ranked recognition, what we called President's Circle at the time, 3 out of those 4 years. I got comfortable at being at the top, but then it all changed. Markets changed, dynamics changed, goal setting changed. They expect more from your top performers, and all of a sudden I wasn't at the top anymore. And what I learned is that don't get too comfortable when you're on your high, but then don't live too long when you're in your low either. And I had some really good coaches during that time that helped me to realize that it is the consistency of your leadership that gets you through both of those times and really will enable a strong culture of a team.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's excellent. You work with a lot of different companies in a lot of different fields, work with a lot of different leaders. Are there any common themes of challenges that you see consistently with your clients that you're working with?
It's a great question, Mike. And yes, is the answer. What I do in J. Hoover Consulting LLC now is that I do executive coaching at all levels. Whether you're an individual contributor who's aspiring to become a manager or whether or not you're a president or CEO, I coach all of them. What I find across the entire spectrum of those roles and across the entire spectrum of my clients is that if we didn't carve out that time, people get so busy doing their business that they don't pause for their own development. It becomes the business imperative that I've got to meet my market share, I've got to meet my revenue, I've got to meet my EBITDA, and it's business, business, business. And you're using an old tool set to handle new problems. And unless you take a pause to sharpen your tools or to get some new tools to deal with those new challenges, you're going to be behind. And that's what I see consistently across all the clients.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've caught myself because I've had some great mentors, some great leaders that I worked with, you being one. So you have a lot of times those lessons with you and things that you know, but because of just the pace, the volume of things you're doing, you can easily fall into bad habits. Like I caught myself just falling into a lot of tell rather than ask, which isn't really my natural personality, but just almost as a time saver getting into the tell. And, hopefully some of that is just kind of some basic EI, right? But
Yeah.
is there anything that you do as a leadership coach to help people develop their emotional intelligence?
It's not really defined so much as the true spirit of emotional intelligence, which, by the way, is a great book, but it's more about self awareness and how you engage with others. If you're the type of leader that shows up as whoever you are on any given day and don't care how it lands on others, you're not really demonstrating emotional intelligence. As they say, EQ can be more important in business than IQ.
Hmm.
And it's if you're asking yourself the question, did I inspire trust and motivation in the person or persons I just interacted with? Did the people that I just interacted with feel respected, appreciated, and valued? Did I leave them feeling personally and professionally fulfilled? Then you're probably at least bridging the gap to emotional intelligence.
Got it. Got it. So, some people have good instincts. You have good instincts. People that have worked for you have good instincts. But when you're coaching and working with companies now, do you have a framework and a model that you follow when you're working with companies like DxTx or other companies that you're working with?
Yes, and this was advice that I got from some C-suite leaders. When I first was displaced from GE Healthcare due to COVID, as you know, that GE Healthcare is a leader in MRI, CT, X-ray, mammography, ultrasound. And when hospitals through COVID stopped elective procedures, nobody was buying our equipment. So GE had some tough decisions to make. So I got displaced and shot myself around the industry a little bit and realized I couldn't find what I was looking for at this stage in my career. And so that's when I started J. Hoover Consulting. I called every C suite person that I had ever worked with, worked for, or had worked for me, and I simply asked them, I have this hypothesis. Would you be willing to buy a solution for this hypothesis, which was We're so busy doing our business that we're not investing in the leaders to help them grow, to help us navigate these choppy waters. The answer was we'd buy it, but you need a product. And so I created something called the Leadership Odyssey that I trademarked in 2021. It's 9 stages of leadership over 12 weeks of coaching sessions. The reason that I do weekly is that it allows enough frequency that people don't get so busy with their business that they lose the learning and growth. But it is long enough that a new learning can become a new behavior, can become a new habit. And so I created the Leadership Odyssey. The foundation of the Leadership Odyssey starts with servant and authentic leadership, 2 leadership styles that I think are very relevant in today's work environment. Now, if you Google it, you'll find 17 very well documented leadership styles. There's autocratic, bureaucratic, democratic, laissez-faire. There are many. I believe in servant and authentic leadership for 2 reasons. One is servant leadership, by definition, is putting the team ahead of me. And servant leadership shouldn't be confused with servitude. So rather than me saying to you, Mike, hey, what can I do for you to help you get through this challenge? A servant leader would say, what can I do to support you for doing it for yourself to get through this challenge? And authentic leadership is about being the best version of yourself to help bring out the best version of others. Authentic leadership doesn't mean bringing whoever you are to work. Bring the best part of you that brings out the best part of others. And so I use that framework as a foundation to help people navigate real situations. I don't use hypotheticals. I talk about real situations that they're facing. Some of those are very good, positive things where somebody just hasn't realized their potential. Some of those are challenging, difficult conversations that people just want a safe space to talk through.
That's great. So along that vein, can you share an example or story of somebody that has transformed their leadership skills through your coaching in your program?
Yeah, I'm very blessed that I have several of those examples, Mike, but let me first frame for this audience what coaching is. Many times in my last 3 companies, I've talked to hundreds of leaders all over the world. And I would ask them, can you tell me a coaching situation that you experienced recently that went really well? And inevitably, they tell me something like, my employee came to me with this problem and I suggested that they try this. They tried it. It worked great. The employee's feeling really good about themselves and I'm so proud of them. I say, well, that's a wonderful story, except that's not coaching. That's counseling. You told somebody what to do. Coaching, of the 5 coaching models that exist in the open marketplace, I think that the underlying theme for all 5 of them is there are 2 principles: ask, don't tell, and listen, understand, not to respond. Basically, curiosity and empathy. If you help people to self-realize by asking them good questions, you'll get a more long-lasting, sustainable behavior change because it's their idea. So to your point earlier, the reason that we tell people is the speed of business. I don't have time for you to self-realize, so I'm just going to tell you what to do and I'll deal with this later. But later never comes. I use a phrase in all my coaching sessions that goes like this: be careful what behavior you reinforce that you don't want repeated. If you continue to think for people, you'll never help them to think for themselves. And if you can make them better, critical, independent decision makers, your job gets a whole lot easier. So what about the example? I have a client, current client, whose chief commercial officer was the type of guy that shows up however he wants to show up. And he thinks he's being authentic, but he's tearing people down to get what he wants, and the culture was miserable. Mm. And so using coaching questions, I just continued to ask him how he wanted to be remembered as a leader. How does he define leadership? Where I eventually got him to is that leadership is not about the number of followers that you have. Leadership is about the number of future leaders that you've developed. You're a good example of that in my world. You talked about my tree, Mike. You run a company. I know I'm not the only person who touched your life, but I started you on a journey to maybe realize something that you didn't realize in yourself. And I'm fortunate to have many of those in my leadership tree. So this gentleman, this chief commercial officer, he came to the self-realization that he wasn't being who he wanted to be remembered to be. And he still has to kick himself back into play every once in a while, but at least he has the self-realization that he is a better version of himself when he calms his emotions and asks more questions. So that's just one example of many where you set them on a journey to become a better leader with the belief that they've never arrived.
Yeah, that's some really, really good insight, Jeff. And what's interesting is I'm thinking back and thinking back to conversations that we've had 25 years ago or even 6 months ago. There's work involved. When you're working with somebody, it's not just like you say, they ask not tell, like, Mike, go do this, or if you do this, then it'll work out. There's work. There's things that you have to have, introspectively to do and really self-evaluate how you go about leading your team. I would have to imagine that not everybody embraces that right away. When you get resistance to somebody that you're working with, are there any techniques you have, or how do you handle the person that's resistant just to the whole process?
Yeah, Mike, you and I learned this a long time ago. The resistance that you see is a symptom of an underlying problem, not the problem itself. And what it comes down to is that you need, through some good coaching questions, to uncover, is this a skill, a will, or knowledge? If it's a skill that you're missing, you just don't know how to do it, I can coach you. If it's knowledge that you don't have that you need in order to do your job better, I can teach you. But if you don't have the will to change and grow, you're likely on the wrong bus. That doesn't make you a bad person, but again, using coaching questions, you can help them to self-realize that they're not doing purposeful, fulfilling work, and that they should go find something else to do that is purposeful and fulfilling for them. So yes, I have resistance. Yes, I have helped CEOs and presidents help people to self-realize that they didn't belong in the company, that they were on the wrong bus. But the reality is that more times than not, we resort to they're not good for the company before we've given them the opportunity to grow a skill or a knowledge.
Right. Kind of on that vein, not necessarily resistance, but one of the things that we're seeing in healthcare, especially amongst physicians, a lot of our physicians, they got into it to help people, and that they're kind of wired that way. But what they've run into throughout their careers are you're dealing with, challenges with prior authorization, medical necessity, peer-to-peer reviews, everything, all these barriers that they have. And I'm seeing some fairly young physician leaders or even young leaders in healthcare that are feeling burnout. They're almost at a crisis point in their career. Any advice for people kind of heading down that path towards crisis or burnout?
Mike, I appreciate you bringing up this topic because it is real. Look, think of a physician that you and I have interacted with in our lifetime who isn't dealing with a problem or a crisis every moment of every day. I don't know many patients that are feeling great and just want their physician to feel better that they go make an appointment and see them.
Right.
It's always something is wrong. And they got in the fix it business. They are going to use some lab work, or they're going to use some diagnostic criteria, some imaging to find out what's going on inside the body. And then they're going to help make a diagnosis to help that person get better. You deal with enough crises day to day, and it begins to wear on you, and you do burn out. Taking a pause, as I mentioned earlier, for your own personal development, taking a pause for your mental health is critically important too. Taking time to refresh, reflect, renew, re energize, all of the re's is critically important. And you need to put that in your calendar. And that is a personal choice of what makes it right for you. It may be meditation. It may be yoga. It may be a morning workout. It may be an evening workout. It may be a vacation where you just really, truly get to check out and not think about anything except the book you want to read. It may be praying, depending on your religious belief. It could be anything, but find a moment that brings you calm and brings you peace in a hectic world.
One of the things that I've also actually shared from watching one of your presentations, a lot of times clinicians are sort of the leaders without specific authority in there. They actually are viewed as leaders. People go to them as leaders, and to them, sometimes it's like, why am I dealing with this? I'm just here to see patients. But the reality is they're leaders without authority. So I think, just having them become aware of that and learning the skills of leadership when you're not in a formal leadership position can also help them kind of deal with that. And I've seen you give a whole presentation on that. That was it was fantastic. I want to shift for just a second. One of the things that we are really lucky at DxTx is that we have some really talented young leaders, really, called high potential people, but they're just great future leaders. What traits should people be looking at that you think make a great leader?
To me, it starts with empathy. You can find different definitions for empathy, but really it is the old school thinking of, walking in someone else's shoes or seeing it through someone else's eyes. Is just because we see the world a certain way doesn't mean that's the way others see it. And taking a pause to empathize with that person and really truly understand why they feel what they feel, why they see things the way they see things. I think humility is important. Get ego out of the way. I don't care what your title is. The reality is that expressing some humility can lift people up to feel more respected, appreciated, and valued. Transparency is important, but sometimes transparency is also mischaracterized. I define transparency as openness with respect. But transparency has also got some swim lanes. Transparency doesn't mean sharing everything you know. Mike, you come into contact with information for DxTx that you can't share with many people. Does that mean you're not transparent? No. Transparency is about sharing the information that helps somebody to be better version of themselves or to be better at their job. The next one, if you do those first three things right, empathy, humility, and transparency, you're going to develop a culture of trust, which I think is a tremendous principle. And then lastly, I round it out with be proactive. Don't wait for the problem to get bigger. Deal with it head on because you're comfortable that you're doing your best to help people feel respected, appreciated, and valued, even though I'm about ready to have a difficult conversation with you.
I'm going to give an example that you will not probably remember, but that dealing with something early was a very quick lesson. I've shared this so many times. I was running a district for J&J and I made a bad hire. I made a bad hire. And a lot of times we talked about, leaders wanting to, out of their own ego, want to hold on and salvage it. And because to them, and I would have felt the same. It was a personal failure that I didn't vet it properly or I missed something in the interview and hired this person. And I remember he just said, don't let it fester. If you made the wrong decision, own it, cut bait right then, and move on. And I've seen it so many times where people try to hold on to a mistake they made to keep trying to rectify it. And they spend so much energy trying to rectify it that it just perpetuates the problem.
And you know who's watching that? Your best people.
Yeah.
When your best people see that you're willing to tolerate as a leader a certain behavior that is not indicative of strengthening the culture of the team, they become disgruntled. And when your best people start to become disgruntled, it's a bad day.
It's a bad
So
day.
being proactive and addressing it quickly and addressing it head on is for the betterment of the entire organization.
You talked about humility. That's one of our core values at DxTx. I mean, everybody has company values, everybody has a mission. I'm very proud that we actually not only do we interview, we hire to, we evaluate against our values. Kind of one step further in leadership, is there a role or what role does vulnerability play as a leader? Is there a role for that?
Absolutely. I really think vulnerability and humility can go hand in hand. You have to be strong at your core to believe in yourself and that you are 100% all in helping the betterment of others, not focused on you. And if you can do that, then you'll have the strength to be vulnerable. It's okay to say, I made a mistake. If you're not willing to be vulnerable, your team will see right through it. So transparency plays a role in vulnerability, humility plays a role in vulnerability, but I think vulnerability is an output of some core principles of humility, transparency, and trust.
Great advice. And so, you fortunately know some of my team and some of the directors and managers throughout our organization. Not a secret, I'm a little longer in the tooth than a lot of people at DxTx, but been
Me
around,
too.
been around a long time. So we have a lot of different generations working in leadership at DxTx. Any advice for dealing with as a leader generational differences?
Yeah, you can find article after article that says that there are more different generations in the workforce today than ever in history.
Hmm,
The reality is that if you are a leader that puts others ahead of yourself, you're a servant leader, that you are going into every conversation with an authentic leadership mindset to inspire trust and motivation and to be a transparent leader, then you can meet them where they are, regardless of their generation. You ask good questions to understand what's important to them, not try to force upon them what you believe. And you will find common ground. And common ground will at least be progress. And then once they have some wins, I've coined a phrase years ago called elevate and celebrate, which is catch people doing something right. Doesn't even have to be something big, but elevate them and celebrate them, whether that's a private celebration or a public celebration. Elevate and celebrate the small and big wins. Generational differences are worth understanding. Like my generation, I'm a boomer. My generation just wants to be recognized for doing really good work. Other generations, they may want to work for a company that is strong on their investment of people's development. Others may want, varied work hours. And there's a lot of things that you have to understand where the mindset is before you can understand what skill set or tool set that they need in order to make them successful.
very good. So I just read a book called When Breath Becomes Air. It's not really a leadership book, but it's a one that's healthcare related. It's about a physician going through the process of dying from a terminal cancer
Uh,
diagnosis and about being on both sides of, being the patient as well as, he was just finishing his residency. So I enjoy seeing things that either healthcare or context or empathy or, read Founder's Mentality. Great book. What are some your favorite leadership books that you could recommend to our audience?
I'm glad you said books, plural, rather than just book, because I would have had a hard time picking one. When I was promoted to become a first-time people leader at J&J as a district manager, we had 2 weeks of training where the foundation of leadership was the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Dr. Stephen R. Covey. I still refer to that today, and it is a foundational, stand the test of time leadership book. And by the way, whether or not you're a leader at work, or whether or not you're a leader at your church, or whether or not you're a leader in your community, or you're a leader in your family, this book applies. I'm a fan of Simon Sinek's works, Start With Why. He's got a newer one published that is Leaders Eat Last, which is really good. I'm a huge fan of John Gordon. The Power of Positive Leadership, The Power of Positive Teams, and The Energy Bus are all good ones. I'm a big believer in other Franklin Covey works. The Five Choices to Extraordinary Productivity by Corey Kogan. I know Corey, and she is a fabulous author and a fabulous leader. Stephen M.R. Covey, the son of Dr. Stephen Covey, has 2 books, The Speed of Trust and Trust and Inspire. And Speed of Trust was a foundation for how I got involved in how important trust was in leadership. His philosophy is that if you think of trust as a bank account, you can make deposits and you can make withdrawals. The key in trust is never be overdrawn. So you and I make a commitment to each other that we're going to continue to make deposits so that if we ever do make a withdrawal, we're not overdrawn. So those are some of the ones that come to my mind that are just great, great leadership books.
Great. Some of those I've read and some I have not that I will make a note to read. Thanks, Jeff. Final question. Most underrated trait of a leader.
True coaching. We tell people what to do with all good intentions, and it comes from the heart, and we think that we're doing the right thing, but nobody's learning anything. I'm just following my orders. And by the way, if it fails, that's not on me, that's on you. It's on the leader. So I think asking insightful questions to help people self-realize a solution and then really truly listening to understand them is an underrated, underappreciated trait of a great leader. I have yet to meet a great leader who was not also a great coach.
Fantastic. Jeff Hoover, J. Hoover Consulting. Never have a conversation that I don't learn something from you. So love talking. This was great. Thank you for joining us and everybody that's going to be watching this in the DxTx network and outside our network. Thank you.
Mike, thank you. I appreciate the invitation to the podcast, and it is wonderful to connect with you.
Awesome. Thanks.